Okay, we are now streaming to YouTube. Sorry for that short delay. With that, it is 3 o'clock. I'll turn it over to Bill to start the meeting.
Okay, this is Bill Fergus, chairperson, and I'd like to call this meeting of the East Franklinton Review Board to order. Belkis, call the roll, please, and everybody raise their hand as she calls your name.
And speak too. I'm going by listening. Dr. Bach?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Fergus?
Here?
Mr. Egner?
Here.
Mr. Manfred?
Present.
Mr. Overly?
Here.
Couldn't hear you.
Mr. Okay. Mr. Szymanski?
Try that again.
Present.
Mr. Szymanski?
Present.
Okay. And Mr. Way?
Say here.
Couldn't hear you, Kim. Yeah, can't hear you.
Mr. Way?
Try to.
He's muted.
His audio is not working at the moment. So Kim, if you can hear me, if you can call in. So at the bottom, it gives you an option to have it call your phone, and that should be able to get you on.
Okay. Can we proceed in the meantime?
Yes.
All right, let's go. All right. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes from our meeting held on January 22nd, 2020? And if so, are there any additions or corrections? And if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move to.
Second?
TJ moves to second.
Okay, Matt Egner moved, TJ seconded. Belkis, call the roll, please.
Thank you. Dr. Bach?
Approve.
Mr. Egner?
Approve.
Mr. Fergus?
Approve.
Mr. Manfred?
Approve.
Mr. Overly? Mr. Szymanski?
Abstain.
And is Mr. Way in audio yet?
He's getting there.
Okay,
Not quite.
that's okay.
We have 5 approvals. That motion passes.
Yes.
Okay, moving on. Moving on to old business, applications for certificate of approval. Our first application is application EF 1812-003. The address is 79 and 8385 McDowell Street. Property owner is Homeport. Applicant is Homeport and Columbus Design LLC. And we are reviewing a new construction, McDowell Place. Belkis, staff report, please.
Yes, so the Columbus Housing Partnership, known as Homeport, is proposing to construct a 4-story multifamily development at the corner of State and McDowell Streets within the West Broad Street subdistricts. The units will be intended for families earning 80% of the area median income or below, and the project is anticipated to be submitted to the Ohio Housing Finance Agency to receive a special allocation of tax credits as a part of the FACT 50 program. The development includes a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units for a total of 50 units and a total of 64 parking spaces, 4 on-site spaces, and 60 spaces within the Gravity 2 parking garage. The project is being developed in conjunction with the approved Gravity 2 development and will utilize parking and site amenities provided for the larger development. In February 2019, the board approved the demolition of the site's existing church on the following conditions, and that's 1, that tax credits or other public financing be awarded to the project for construction of multifamily housing to provide affordable housing. 2, documentation of the existing structure to be coordinated with the Historic Preservation Office. And 3, board review and approval of the elevations, materials, landscaping, and lighting. In February 2019, the board also approved the construction of the new multifamily apartment on the following conditions. And that's 1, board review and approval of the elevations, materials, landscaping, and lighting, and 2, to provide 60 parking spaces through a shared parking agreement. Today, the applicant is requesting approval for the elevations of the proposed building. The applicant will return to the board at a future date for approval of the materials, lighting, and landscaping. At the February 2019 meeting, the board recommended that the building be set apart in design from the Gravity Co-housing building, incorporate a mix of materials and roofline accents, engage and activate the street through walk-up units or porches and storefront windows, and remove any literal representations of the church. In response to board feedback, the applicant has mixed traditional styles and materials along with modern lines and materials to give nods to the existing church and approved Gravity 2 buildings while not replicating them. In addition, the applicant added stoop-like entrances along State and McDowell Streets and window glazing at the covered main entrance to engage with the street. The submittal includes a site plan, elevations, renderings, floor plans, and photos of the existing site. And so, Mark, if you could turn to the application materials from last year, to that very first page. Yeah. So this is what, just to refresh everyone's memory, what they brought last year. And then if you could flip to the new materials, Mark. So this is a rendering of that same angle. So this is State and McDowell. So you'll see the porch-like entrances at the base of staircases and hallways. You'll see the mix of brick and then that darker gray material there. And then if you kind of run your eye along down what is McDowell Street to the right-hand side of the page, that's that covered entrance. And then if you could go to page 3, Mark. Yeah, so these are floor plans, so you can see the front of the building versus the back. In the back, you'll see those few parking spaces as well as like a little meditation garden. And if you could go to page 5, Mark. Oh, sorry, go back one more. Okay, yeah, so here are the first 2 elevations. So this is the east and south elevation. So you'll see that covered main entrance there that has the glazing and a rendering of that, along with the south elevation. And then go forward one more, Mark. Yeah, and so then this has the west and north elevation. So if you could flip back to the first page of this PDF, Mark. So after review, the proposal is consistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan, and staff does recommend approval. And so if the board does agree to approve that, that motion would be to approve the elevation in accordance with the existing conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Belkis. Any questions for staff? If you have any questions, please raise your hand. If not, I have the following people listed as speaking on behalf of Homeport McDowell Place. They are Leah Evans, Roy Lowenstein, and Carrick Sherrill. And if you will each, as I state your names again, raise your hands, and then I'm going to administer an oath, and then you have the floor one at a time, please. So Leah Evans, Roy Lowenstein, and Carrick Sherrill. Okay, for each of you, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief? Carrick?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
And Roy?
Yes.
Okay, The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are pleased to be back with you to share the additional development work we've done on the McDowell Place project. I'll let Carrick, speak to the design. I'll just share with you that, this has been another year or so in the getting here, and want to thank Dr. Box and the Franklinton Area Commission for their work on the target area plan and getting that approved with the Ohio Housing Finance Agency has now allowed us to be able to move forward in order to get final development plan approval, finalized drawings so that we can move forward with actually closing and starting on construction, which would happen sometime next year. We have been diligently working on a memorandum of agreement with the State Historic Preservation Office and the City of Columbus and consultant parties. That has not been executed yet, but we do have a finalized draft that is being circulated for comments right now. So that memorandum of agreement includes the historic documentation that Belkis referenced, as well as some other requirements for a study of Franklinton row houses and a study of other vacant historic structures, religious structures in the area that could be potentially preserved or you have other adaptive reuses. So those study elements, again, are embedded in the memorandum of agreement that would be executed between the city, the State Historic Preservation Office, and Homeport. And right now, again, our hope is that with the 50 units, we do, just one correction, I'm sorry, on the application, Belkis, we don't own the building yet. It's still owned by the City of Columbus and the Land Redevelopment Office. So we've been working with and will continue to work with John Turner on the timing and how the demolition process would go. And then that would then work into our schedule on our construction side also. So we would still take some specific steps with him on potential for selective demo of any pieces that could be reused for interior design, like we had talked about windows or anything else like that we can use possibly in the interior of the building, as well as with some of the pictorial displays that we were wanting to do inside the building also. So I just wanted to give you a quick update on that side of it from the development side, and then I will pass it to Carrick.
Hello all. In terms of the design of the building, it's a fairly straightforward rework of where we were before. There's a few things that have changed with regard to the minimum requirements for the Ohio Housing Finance Association agency with regard to the size of the dwelling units. So we were able to actually take advantage of the difference between the 2019 requirements and the 2020 requirements, which were a change in, we were able to make the units a little smaller, which actually helped to get the site to work a little bit better. We added the green space in the rear. We added actually a parking space on site. I think it loosened up the site in general, being able to pull the building off the property line a little bit further. It enabled the front porches. Beyond that, just referring back to the comments that we had from the commission some year ago, we tried to activate the street a little bit more, definitely on the McDowell Place side, with the glass entry and the covered entry, as well as introducing more traditional walk-up or townhome style stoops to engage the street. I think there will be some additional landscaping more than what you see in the renderings. The street trees there are not accurate to the street trees that are existing, but I was trying to do the best I could to show those and actually show the building as well. So I don't have any other comments with regard to the design, but I am certainly able to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sherrill. Do we have any questions for the applicants?
I have a few questions.
And this is Art. Okay. Yeah, when you are going to speak, please state your name just before you start to speak. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Bart Overly here. I think one of the things questions about are the two end pieces, what I'll call the building blocks. So you have this 4-story warehouse kind of piece, which is the staple between the two building blocks that are scale of the townhouses to the west. I actually feel like the detailing of it, we might have said at the meeting a year ago to have more traditional style in terms of the walk-ups and things of that nature, maybe from a planning standpoint. But given that we're in an arts and innovation district, this is just a question if you had looked at anything that, maybe it has a nod towards traditional detailing, but it doesn't try to replicate it. I don't know. Like I'm having trouble fitting those two parts together a little bit. Another question I have is, this one could be rather simple, but just proportionally, it feels like the windows there's like more wall than window, and I wonder if maybe just bumping up the size of those windows just a little bit would help this feel a little less. It feels very, the end pieces in particular feel very 75% wall or 80% wall and a little less in terms of window fenestration. So those are some initial comments that I've got.
Bart, this is Ron. And I definitely agree with your comment. And if we could switch to page 4 on this, because I was looking through at the northern piece, I think that hits to your point exactly. There's double windows in that section and not all the single windows. And that elevation is much better than the southern portion with all the single windows, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that, Ryan. And I like the bit of on the third floor. But I mean, you have these kind of pediment details that are referencing the entry pieces, which are really part of that 2-story base. And so maybe the kind of penthouse or the top level pullback piece could be a little lighter in terms of its articulation, and you bring some of those elements that are up on what's really the roof parapet, roof tear have on the south. You bring that down the top of that second story to make a clearer distinguish top to that level. But I agree. I think there are some better things going on the north piece that could translate to the south piece.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
TJ Manfres here. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but it sounds like we are not looking to reuse the church window that we were fairly strongly hoping we could salvage on the exterior of the building. Is that something that will be used on the inside of the building, or is just hopeful to be used on the inside of the building?
That's a question for the applicant.
So we took the feedback from the previous meeting that to not have that be, again, a part of that exterior element. It is our hope once we get to dig in more on the selective demo that we could preserve those windows and incorporate them in on the interior, at least one of them on the interior. Until we're able to actually do an evaluation of the integrity of those windows, it's hard to say, but that would be our intent. And again, took that out of the previous part of the design as feedback from our previous meeting. Carrick?
There's the rose window. The condition of it is certainly very deteriorated. It makes it very difficult to use or reuse. However, there are some stained glass window sashes in the first floor narthex of the church that appear to be in reasonably good condition, and because they're in window sashes that can be fairly easily removed, we identified those as an item that should be fairly easy to remove and use in the interior somewhere. You know, other than that, we've been working with John Turner to identify other interior items of the church that are even remotely usable or salvageable.
This is Bart again. This is that's my recollection as well. You know, we're never recommending that any of those elements be used on the facade. I mean, it could be a cool sculptural piece in your roof terrace or something like that. But other than that, you know, like I think you could do nods to the existing church by doing a Flemish bond brick pattern on the two end pieces, or doing something kind of the brick detailing that references what was there in some subtle way.
Ken?
I think one of the this is Carrick again. I think one of the reasons why I picked up the pilasters in the warehousey body of the building in between the north piece and the south piece was to reference to a certain extent the pilasters or the masonry pieces on you know, that would have been in between the supporting the roof of the body of the church. So I think there was something about that spoke to me that, you know, it's a very somewhat common architectural element, but it was certainly a piece that I considered as something that could be transposed between the two building styles.
Kim, did you have a note?
Carrick, go ahead and continue your thought.
I just wanted to respond to a certain extent about the windows in the elevation of the south elevation. You know, we could certainly bump up the size of those. I had a bit of difficulty getting that elevation to synchronize with the floor plans, just the rhythm. So the ability to have double windows like I did in the east elevation was a little bit more difficult, but we could certainly increase the size of the single windows there. I think certainly the width and the height in some of them.
Okay, Kim?
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, Kim. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to echo Bart and Ryan were saying about that east end of the building, right? East end. My first reaction was that it's very, very solid. And I think it's really interesting that you have kind of adopted this idea of scaling it down and making it more part of the State Street kind of feel. But that corner of McDowell and State Street to me is the 100% corner in this area, and it's a shame to kind of downplay the relationship of the building to that streetscape environment. And I would certainly suggest that you look at, I don't know if it's just increasing the size of the windows, but it needs to have more transparency. It needs to feel like it's part of that corner. Right now, it seems like it's the one part of the whole complex that's very downplayed, and to me, it should be the star of the block. So I would encourage you to maybe revisit that a little bit.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Jeff? Or I'm sorry.
This is Belkis.
Yes.
So what I'm kind of hearing in terms of the vibe that I'm getting from the board is that maybe there's some additional work that needs to be done on these elevations for everyone to feel comfortable. And so, there is the option to table this application for this month and have them continue to work on, those details of the elevations and come back for approval at a later date. So just as a reminder, that is an option here.
Right, and that's you kind of took the words right out of my mouth, Bill, because I did get the impression that the.
Well, Bill, can I ask one question of our architects? If you're looking at page 1, where we spoke about having the 2 large massings on the north and south end with the more industrial-looking building in the middle, that lighter color brick runs through that and has columns going up. Kim, to your point of being a little more, would it be a little more grand to continue more brick in between the two to tie the two together as a bigger building that has an upper kind of addition on it, as opposed to bringing the gray hardy all the way down to the ground floor on that east elevation?
Again, my point is about
That-
transparency and
Yeah.
just the massiveness of that corner. Lots of masonry. It just doesn't feel right. It feels like it's the leftover piece of the building, as opposed to me, it should be you start with that corner as the star, and everything else is kind of builds up off of that. I like the rest of the elevations and stuff, by the way. It's just this corner is what reluctant to like it right now, because it just doesn't seem like it's respecting a key place in East Franklinton, the key corner.
TJ,
How do others feel about the corner?
I totally agree with everybody on that east corner. That being the corner that faces the new gravity project, that faces the Idea Foundry, that faces downtown on the State Street corner is underwhelming, and to I think everybody's point that there's a tremendous amount of massing there in the middle, in between those 6 small windows and doors, that is just heavy.
And this is Bart again.
I mean, even if it's not open and transparent, if it is artistic, if it is colorful, if it is something that celebrates the district, is I think better than a big brick blank wall.
That says it well for me too, TJ. I would go for something that's not neoclassical. I think the massing of it is really nice. I quibble. I'm not so sure about the brick pilasters in the middle. I would tend to make that middle piece the gasket between the two buildings. Let it be its own thing. But I agree with the comments about particularly starting with the south mass.
I agree with Bart on the columns in the center. I think the two structures should stand alone and kind of be connected. Maybe there's brick on that first ground level, but bringing those pilasters or columns up, I'd let that building be kind of the background building and let the two brick buildings, stand for themselves. And that connecting piece could be brick, like the first level that kind of brings them together. But I even wouldn't be opposed to bringing more of the darker material down so that it kind of looks like two older buildings.
That was my question to you guys. I think you've touched on it now perfectly. I feel like the brick columns are either, it needs to be brick 2 stories up or less brick. But right now it seems like it's a tough bridge. I think we've. Does anybody have anything else? I think we're in a good spot to.
Yeah, well, thank you, TJ.
Yeah,
actually, my question to the applicant is: do you feel like you've gotten enough direction from the board to go back and make changes to the design?
This is Carrick. Yes, this has been some very good direction. It is. I would maybe like to help you folks recall, and I know that the makeup of the commission may be slightly different than it was the first time we came to show the building. But the first building that we ever proposed for this site had a grand entrance corner and was very transparent. The style of the building was, definitely more modern, but at that point in time, the comments from the commission was a lot more focused on making sure that the State Street piece was being respectful of the castle of townhomes that are just to the west. So programmatically, we can very easily move the community spaces to that corner and have a much more transparent corner, and have a purpose for that transparency. So I just want to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page for maybe having the building entry or kind of flip-flopping the east elevation north piece. I could really kind of pick that up and put it at the corner, that would create more transparency and more of an entrance there at the corner of State and McDowell.
Carrick, Bart here.
I'm going to quickly interject for a minute. I just want to quickly interject. What Carrick said actually complements the design principles in the plan. So the plan notes that if a building is situated on a corner, that ideally the entrances be on that corner, or that corner be as transparent as possible. So that would complement the plan to a T.
And this is Bart again. I think, Carrick, that would make a whole lot of sense. Because even when you look at how the building aligns across McDowell Street, it's going to have more visual presence along State Street as you approach it. It'd be a much better place to make a primary entrance. And I also think when you come back, you should show the building with the townhouse building to its immediate west, because I think it's going to make a better argument for you than the rendering is right now. That I think it is, from a massing standpoint, fitting in nicely with that building, and it doesn't have to be traditionally or historically detailed to do that. It's a massing thing. So those are my thoughts there. I think it'd be a great move, though.
And Bart, to pile onto that, and I agree with everything you said. I was looking at the floor plan again and thinking about moving the community space to that corner. I don't know what you mean about putting the entrance on the corner, But couldn't the entrance to the building be just behind this massing? So it's not like occupying the corner, but it's just back from the corner, and the community space that you have is basically on the corner.
Yes,
You know what
that's
I mean?
certainly, yeah, that's certainly one of the options
Because I like this, I like
programming here.
the massing of the building, right? And if you try to put an entrance stuck on there, it might not. I think you could just tuck it behind it, and still keep the mass intact, but have the glass and more transparency.
It's part of the industrial sleeve that's behind. So you'd get your covered entrance, and the sleeve would just sort of tuck inside and be that entry wall for the community space. Gives you that covered entrance.
Okay, Carrick, is that good for you in terms of direction?
Yes, I believe it does.
Okay. At this time, then I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to table.
It should be a
Kim
motion
Way.
to table, ideally.
Kim Way, motion to table.
Okay, do I have a second?
Matt Egner, second.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, Belkis, call the roll, please.
Dr. Bach,
Approve.
Mr. Egner,
Approve.
Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. Manfred,
Approve.
Mr. Overly,
Approve.
Mr. Szymanski,
Approve.
and Mr. Way.
Approve.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you next month, then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Our next application is EF 20-01003, address 429, 451, 455 West Broad Street. Property owner is Gravity Project 2 LLC. Our applicant is Jessica Shuren, and we are reviewing Gravity 2 Townhouse Building. Belkis, staff report, please.
Yes. So the proposed Gravity 2 townhome building will run along McDowell Street and line the Gravity 2 parking garage within the West Broad Street subdistrict. The applicant is seeking approval of plans for a new 5-story residential building. The building will contain 6 townhome apartments on the first and second floors and 18 flat apartment units on floors 3 through 5. The applicant came to the board for a conceptual review in January. In response to board comments to reduce the angled building materials, create a more welcoming streetscape, and to focus on the verticality of the building, the applicant has added landscaping at the entrances, incorporated the paint colors in a vertical pattern, and omitted the angular building materials. The submittal includes a site plan, elevations, materials, and renderings. And Mark, if you could open that JPEG rendering photo. All right, so here's a rendering. So this is looking north along McDowell Street there, and you'll see the vertical colors, running up and down in the massing. And then next, could you go to page 2 of the elevations? There we go. Yeah, so here you see the main elevation with the primary materials there. You can see that they cut down a lot on the types of materials. So you see the 2 types of paneling and then the 2 types of brick. And then could you go to the materials page, Mark? It's the one with the colors, it's a separate PDF. Yes. So here's more detail on the materials, and then those are the colors there that are going to go in that vertical pattern. So after staff review, the proposal is consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan, and staff does recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Board, any questions for staff? If not, we've got for speakers here. We have, and raise your hand as I call your name, Jessica Shuren. Recognize you there. Hello, Jessica. Heather Rother. And tentatively, is Brian Suter here? I don't see Brian. Okay, so we
I
have
don't believe so.
two speakers. Okay, so Jessica and Heather, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief? Heather?
Yes.
And Jessica? Jessica?
Yes.
There we go. Okay, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. I apologize. There's an echo on my end. I don't think it's on yours, but in case my rhythm is a little off. So as Belkis mentioned, we have a 5-story residential building. Townhouse apartments are on floors 1 and 2, and flat apartments are on floors 3 through 5. I just want to clarify, the rendering that Belkis showed was actually from before we made material changes coming out of our January EFRB meeting. And then the renderings within the application is after the changes. So I will speak to the comments from the January meeting and how we've addressed them. And then if we have any questions, we can loop in Heather and get her input if needed. So a few of the comments were related to the materiality. So one comment was to uncomplicate the materiality. What we did was we switched to hardy panels. So now we have hardy panels on the facade of the building and horizontal lap siding on the balcony insets, which are going to be painted the varying colors, which is consistent from the last time. And then we do have full face brick to remain at the first and some second stories, but we eliminated the brick on the stories above and between the windows. We just thought it kept things very busy. And then we've also painted the aluminum railings light gray instead of the color of the inset balcony lap siding. And a lot of that was, again, to kind of simplify the look, but part of it was maintenance as well. And then we reduced the angled building materials, so they no longer follow the roof line, and instead they focus on the verticality of the building. I believe that was a comment from Bart and maybe some others. And we think that actually it looks nice for the building, enhances the building, and is better on the streetscape. And then, as Belkis mentioned, we created a more welcoming streetscape. We'll have planters outside the apartments to add some softness to the streetscape, but otherwise McDowell Street is within the city's purview for the streetscape. And that is it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Well, I really like the simplification. This is Bart Overly. I really like the simplification of materials. Actually, this is just a question because when I look at the color scheme, it reminds me so much of Easter, and I hate the Easter color scheme. I'm just wondering, like, what if you went with 3 colors? Like, I was looking at the dill pickle, wild pink, and icy blue, and you just went 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. You know, you still have variation. You don't get every single one getting its own different color, but you never have the same color side by side. I just wondered if that's a consideration that the team has looked at.
We have looked at it. So these colors were picked specifically by Brett, and a lot of it revolves around the muralist that he wants to work with for the rest of the site. So I think in the context of the full site, like if you were to look at the murals on the different buildings, they wouldn't seem so outlandish. But the other piece of it was to give each facade of this west side of the building its own personality. I'm personally not against it, but it's something that's probably very near and dear to Brad Kaufman that I wouldn't be comfortable changing without his approval.
Got it. That answers it. It's got a context I'm not aware of.
Anyone else?
I don't necessarily agree with Bart. I like it.
Noted.
That thick skin.
Anyone else? There are no other comments. I'd entertain a motion.
I move to
Make a motion
approve.
to approve as submitted.
Okay,
Judy
motion
Box.
submitted to approve by Judy Box. Second?
Second, Bart Overly.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, Belkis, call the roll, please.
Dr. Bach,
Approve.
Mr. Egner,
Approve.
Mr. Burgess,
Approve.
Mr. Manfred, Mr. Manfred,
Sorry, I was still on mute.
do you approve? Or,
Jay, do you
Approve.
approve?
Can you hear me?
oh, yep.
Sorry about that.
Okay, Mr. Overly,
Approve.
Mr. Szymanski,
Approve.
and Mr. Way.
Approve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on. Next application, new business, application for certificate of approval, application number EF 20-03002. Address is 455 West Broad Street. Property owner is Gravity Project 2 LLC. The applicant is Devin Carruthers, and we are reviewing Gravity 2 lighting and Solazzo Plaza. Belkis, staff report, please.
Yes, so 455 West Broad Street is the site for the mixed-use development Gravity 2, which includes several landscape open space areas. The open spaces include a public courtyard connecting West Broad Street to McDowell Street, a public corner plaza at State Street and McDowell Street, and an interior private courtyard for the co-living building. Today, the applicant is requesting approval for the Solazzo Plaza landscape plan and the lighting for the public courtyard, co-living building, courtyard, and Solazzo Plaza. The submittal includes a site plan, inspiration photos, renderings, and materials. And then if we could have the materials pulled up. Yes, so if we could go to page 4, I believe. Yeah, so first we'll see the lighting for the mixed-use courtyard. If you just want to flip on through. Yeah, so here's some inspiration photos. And then these are the lighting types. So the first will be used in the benches. That second are these poles that will come from the ground. And then you have the larger, taller LED light poles. So those will be for the mixed use courtyard. And if you could keep going. Okay, so that's the lighting layout. So you see there the blue are the bench lighting, the pink are those very tall light poles, and then I think this yellow, those will be the light sticks that come from the ground. And then next, yep, so these are renderings here of what they'll look like. Keep going, yeah. There we go. And then, so this is for the co-live courtyard. So next you'll see some inspiration photos. And then here are the lighting types for those. So again, you'll have the light sticks, the poles, a chandelier option, and then this is actually a tree uplight. So you'll see that in the plaza space. Keep going. And so that's the layout there. So you'll see the co-live courtyard in the interior, and then you'll see the plaza lighting, which has that tree uplight. You keep going. And then that's the rendering for that, for the co-live building. And then this is the Salazzo Plaza. And so that's the plan for that. I will mention the breathe graphic, and then you'll see another graphic at the corner that has gravity. Those are just conceptual at this point. Those are not up for approval. And then you'll see the site lighting type for the plaza there. I believe that's, yep. And then one more rendering of the plaza should be, there we go. Okay, so then after this review, the proposal is largely consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. Although the tree uplight is directed upward and shines above the horizontal plane, staff recognizes that the light has minimal spillage beyond the height of the tree as recommended by the plan, and staff recommends approval. And if approved, the board will grant the following modifications to the East Franklinton District Development Standards, and that's to permit a light fixture to exceed the 18-foot height limit by 6 feet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay, if not, appearing on behalf of Gravity 2 for this application are Devin Carruthers, raise your hand, and Carmine Russo Jr. And so, gentlemen, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief? Carmine?
Yes, I do.
And Devin?
Yes, if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
All right.
So the floor is yours, gentlemen.
Great. Thank you all. Belkis, thank you for that intro. You covered a lot of it. So I'll be pretty brief, and then I'll let Carmine kind of walk through some of the plans in a little more detail. So a lot of what we have today was already shown in October with the landscape approval in terms of the lighting. We're just coming back for actual official approval on that. Salazzo is that corner of State and McDowell that everyone talked in the first application about being so prominent. It was actually in the plans in October, but we didn't show it in part of the approval. And then the one other thing I wanted to clarify that I actually missed in the staff report, I think, and Carmine, you can correct me if I'm wrong when you jump on, but I believe that the light poles are actually at 26 feet. So I think it's an 8-foot variance that we're requesting. It's the same exact poles that we have in terms of height across the street at phase 1, which you saw on the Google Maps image when Belkis pulled that up at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
That is all I have. So Carmine, if you want to jump in, and then I'll be around for any questions.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll be brief as well. You pretty much went through it, Belkis, but when we were there in October and received approval on the site landscape design, much of the renderings you see for both of the courtyard spaces were the same renderings that you saw then. All we're really doing is showing you the final lighting fixtures to the point, to Devin's point. Also, to his other point, they're 26 feet tall are those projection lights. They will have color changing capabilities in the mixed use courtyard area. In the co-live courtyard area, they will just be white LEDs. The tree up lights in the seating platform at the Salazzo will also have color changing capabilities. They're RGB color changing technology, so they'll have controls to change them to whatever they'd like them to be throughout the seasons and throughout the year. In addition, I think the rendering that's up right now, which was an earlier concept, but it was important to understand for massing and what is in our project and what is not. So you can see, we embellished the renderings a little bit, but what is part of the city's right-of-way plan on both McDowell and State Street, and what actually falls in our site is really that darker paved area that talks about, that says Salazzo Plaza on it with the seating platform. And with the platform, it's just a wood platform seat that's much like what you see in the mixed-use courtyard that we already approved last time. Just wood slats. It's a thermomollified wood. It's meant to last quite a long time, and so it's meant to not only serve a daily seat, bench, but also as a community gathering space at times as well, which you see in some of the renderings that follow this if you wanted to move forward. But with that, I mean, most of the landscape was all approved last time, so the planting beds are all the same. It's really just the finalizing of that seating platform and the corner.
Any questions for the applicant?
I have a question about Salazzo Plaza. This is Bart Overly. Is that seating platform? You might have mentioned this, but is it going to have that big gravity sign on it?
So, Devin, you could maybe. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I can take it. Mark, do you mind flipping to page 22? I think is probably best. To answer your question, Bart, the intent is that, although that is not, we're not asking for graphic approval right now. That is the intent of that, but that is not technically part of this approval, as I understand it, Belkis.
That's correct.
Got it. Thanks.
This is Kim Way. It does show lights related to the sign. Are we proving those lights and not the sign, or do the lights go with the sign?
No, the lights go with the sign, and they'll be approved at a later graphic submission.
So actually, the lights we are asking for approval on are the tree up lights that would be within the landscape bed, and those lights are not associated with the signs.
Right.
Yeah, if you can see the kind of magenta that's on the tree itself, that is what would be getting approved today. And then the inner tube light that looks like inside the gravity sign is not part of today. Does that make sense, Kim?
Yeah. I just saw the lights there going, oh, there's more lights, but those weren't presented, so I assume they're part of the sign.
Mm-hmm.
And I did have one other question about the pole lights, not the pole lights, the really thin ones.
The stick lights?
The stick.
Yeah, what do they call it? The light sticks. What's the durability of those? They look very thin and like easily breakable. And I mean, what's the material? And
Yeah, so it's an acrylic glass that will have an LED at the base that shines, that illuminates the inside of it. It will have its own footer. And right now we're kind of working through with the site contractor on how we might create a more robust foundation that connects a few of them and kind of gangs them together, because there was a little concern, that they could be hit. So we're definitely trying to work through a good detail on how they can stay in the ground and a good foundation.
I'm looking at the page 9, and they're very close to the walk. I could see somebody just walking by there and whacking them. But are they fairly durable that they'll take some abuse? And
Yeah,
are you saying
that's what we're working through?
Okay. So
they're in like I said, they're pretty thick acrylic glass. I mean, I don't know exactly how thick the glass itself is, but it's meant to be in an outdoor exterior environment, an urban space. It's based off something we actually found that was installed at a university in Michigan that has been in for a few years. So we're fairly confident that it'll withstand the urban environment.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Last ones that want to see those broken, Kim.
Any further questions? If not, I will entertain a motion from the floor.
Motion to approve by Kim Way.
Seconded by TJ.
Okay, the application has been moved, approved, and second. Any further discussion? If not, Belkis, call the roll, please.
Yep. Dr. Bach,
Approve.
Mr. Egner,
Approve.
Mr. Burgess,
Approve.
Mr. Manfred,
Approved.
Mr. Overly,
Approve.
Mr. Szymanski,
Approve.
and Mr. Way.
Approve.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Next application is EF 20-05003. Address is 448, 454 West Town Street and 441 and 443 West Chapel Street. Property owner is Harper Enterprises, Inc. Applicant is Ryan Keener, Mode Architects, and we are reviewing beer garden exterior modifications. Elka, staff report, please.
Yes. So the land grant beer garden is located at 448 to 454 West Town Street and 443 West Chapel, 441 and 443 West Chapel Street within the Arts and Innovation Subdistrict. A site plan for a beer garden and live entertainment venue use was approved in June and August 2019. The temporary approval included the following conditions by the East Franklinton Review Board, and that was for approval of the beer garden to be limited to 3 years, so expiring in 2021, with the option to reapply to the East Franklinton Review Board for an extension. 2, that the surfaces in the beer garden be crushed gravel. 3, that the applicant commits to the extension, which is 441 and 443 West Chapel, being used for lawn games or similar, and with no additional seating provided in the extension. And lastly, 4, staff review and approval of the dimension cross-section of the proposed fence. So today, the applicant has not met the conditions of the previous approval stated above, and instead has requested a new application for a new beer garden site plan, which includes adding 13 new blazed maple trees, fencing, and new swing gate along the site boundary to match existing, a row of 10 portable toilets on the east part of the site, a video wall on the southwest side of the site, and an event stage and shipping container for storage on the northern part of the site. The submittal includes a site plan, renderings, materials, and inspirational photos. And if we could look at the materials, page 3. So here's what the site looks like now. If we could flip to page 5. Yeah, okay. So here's the site plan. So it might be a little hard to see, but yeah, there we go. Thank you. So you'll see the proposed event stage on that northern piece of the what is the extension with the shipping container next to it. And then if you kind of draw your eye to the right and down, you'll see those portable toilets. And then in the center, you'll see the new maple trees that are being proposed. And then if you draw your eye to the left a little bit, you'll see the proposed video wall, which will be on a raised platform. And then amongst the site and around, you'll see, a new swing gate, you'll see fencing. And then here are some renderings of the event stage and the shipping container. If you go one more. And then there's the video wall. And then were there some inspiration photos, Mark, that we could go to? Here. And then there's one more page. Great. Yeah, so there's the inspiration for that stage piece especially. So after staff review, this proposal is not consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. Staff previously supported the beer garden extension in 441 and 443 West Chapel Street based on the applicant's statement that it would be limited to lawn games or similar. The basis of support was that no additional guests would be accommodated in the beer garden extension, and therefore no additional parking would be needed. the parking reduction requested for the new current site plan proposal is not appropriate based on the intensity of the use and the scale of the reduction requested. Additionally, the proposed site programming is not consistent with the existing fabric and scale of the commercial and residential development in the surrounding neighborhood. As such, staff recommends disapproval based on the following plan recommendations, and that's 1, new construction should be integrated with the existing fabric and scale of development in surrounding neighborhoods, and 2, that parking reductions may be appropriate for higher density mixed use projects. Shared parking arrangements may be appropriate. Please note that if this application is disapproved today, the previous approval will still be in effect and the beer garden can operate as previously approved with the aforementioned conditions. As stated in the June and August 2019 meetings, staff recommends that the board reevaluate the proposal if the applicant returns to the board in 2021 to potentially request permanent approval. In addition, staff recommends that all parcels pertaining to land grant activities be combined into one parcel for future permanent approval to be supported. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Belkis. Any questions for staff?
I do. This is Judy Box.
Yes.
Just for clarification, as I understand it, they're not asking to have more patrons. Is that true?
So from staff perspective, all that we're evaluating is the proposed site plan. And so that site plan does include the addition of portable toilets, an event stage, a video wall. So we're just evaluating the site programming. The applicant can speak to whether they're intending to have more applicants in those areas. But that's all that staff can evaluate is what is on the site plan.
Okay. So it's a change of the jazzing up of the use that's the objection. Okay.
Well, this is TJ. They currently have an event stage and a video wall, so they're relocating it, as I understand it, and making it somewhat more permanent. But the use is not really changing from what has been previously approved and what's there currently for the last year.
So I don't understand the objection.
So from staff, go ahead.
Yeah, if you could speak to whether the current uses, including that video wall and an event stage that apparently currently exists, are those permitted uses currently?
Yeah, so if Mark could flip to the proposed site plan. Okay, so currently on the site, there is a raised platform on the southern part of the site where the proposed video wall is. So there's a raised platform there, which I believe has been used for, maybe small concerts or something. But what's different about this application is that they're now proposing to put in a large, more formalized video wall and then have a larger stage on the northern portion of the site. And so when they came last year, the impression for the expansion of the beer garden into that 441 and 443 West Chapel Street was just to provide some lawn games, and that no additional seating would be there, and no additional, patrons would be kind of standing and in that area. And what we're worried about is intensity of use. So if this were to be approved, the parking reduction, which currently is, so there's currently a parking reduction of 264 spaces. And so with formalizing this proposed site to have a large event stage with portable toilets and a video wall, we're worried that the intensity of the use is going to be too large, given the scale of the rest of the neighborhood. There's a residential home just to the west of the event stage, And, just given the surrounding area, we're worried it'd be too intense of a use.
Judy Box again. Intense, does that mean you expect more bodies or more noise?
We can infer that it would be both.
But how many, this is Bart Overly. It used to be a game area, now it's going to be a stage area. I mean, they're basically replanning that entire site. But the area that's L that I read as the AstroTurf area, where that you might consider to be new seating because people would be sitting on it watching concerts, small concerts. How many square feet is that? It's not that big, right? Do we know? Maybe that's a question for the applicant.
The square footage is, sorry, I'm just looking here. Oh, I don't have my notes here.
Yeah, just for L. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's
hold that one for the applicant then.
This is Ryan.
Yeah.
I think my bigger question for Belkis and the commission will be, we keep moving further and further to permanent structures with a short-term approval. And what my fear would be that if we approve this, there's a significant amount of monetary investment. We're going to be sitting here in 2 years from now being told, well, we were able to work out an extension. We want to extend this. We've put all this money into it. And I think what we approved was short-term thing. And the idea was there has to be a permanent plan for this in the future. And the 3 years was kind of the time frame. And so my question for the applicant is to be, where does it stand in terms of negotiations with the land seller? Because this isn't, this type of investment isn't coming cheaply. And I think that there's a longer term play.
Well, Ryan, if I may, your point I think is very valid, but it also allows us the monetary cost is on the applicant, and if in 2 years the noise and or the amount of people are not are more than we had bargained for or had approval in mind with, then we can not approve for him to continue this after in the 2 year re-up. And at that point his money would be spent. I think that gives us the ability to maybe have a little more leeway with regards to what we would normally do something on a part-time. That's only my thought.
I agree it does it, but the reality when it's there and people's emotions and public opinion, I mean, there's just a lot, taking something away is a lot harder than putting something in play. And that's my, so I think hearing from the applicant and understanding plans is important.
And this is Belkis again. One thing that staff was discussing was location and context. And so, all our staff was trying to think about where in a dense urban area is a, kind of open concert venue that's visible from the right of way, that's sort of set up like this. And we feel like this is almost more of a, maybe even suburban, somewhere where there's more space for this type of activity. And with the event, the live entertainment venue use, as I stated, it does require 264 parking spaces, given, that type of use. And the reason why staff supported that use change last year was because of, the applicant stating that there would just be lawn games in this area. So to add a large, event stage of this degree with portable toilets and then a large video wall, we're just sort of concerned about the context and the intensity of use given, the fabric of the community surrounding it. Thanks.
And if I may add, I agree completely with whoever said that if we allow this to be built, I think we need to assume that it is most likely permanent.
Yes.
It's very, very difficult to take something away once it's been put in place. I mean, that's kind of the business philosophy behind Uber asking for forgiveness rather than permission. Once something's in place and it's been, it's become popular with a segment of the population, it becomes politically very difficult to undo something like that.
But isn't that the exact?
I'm not making this comment, just so I'm clear on this. I'm not making this comment to say whether we should or shouldn't do this. I'm making this comment more in the realm of if we do it, we need to consider that it's unlikely that it's going to get undone.
Well, if there are negative consequences, if it is negatively affecting the neighborhood, if it is negatively affecting to a substantial degree parking in the area and in the neighborhood, then it's not hard at all for us in 2 years to say, no, you're not going to be renewed to continue doing this. If there's no issues that we've had in 2 years, then I think yeah, it would be politically difficult to take something away that has had no negative implications and that the neighborhood and public likes. I don't know that we would want to do that at that point if we've had 2 years of success. But I think that is the definition of us giving a temporary permit to an application like this, and this is one of those opportunities for us to see how this plays out. If they're willing to spend the money on the stage, my hope is that they would make their money and a return on their money in year one, and year two would be very profitable. And if we decide not to move forward with it, it other than the labor to tear it down or to turn it back over to the owners, I mean, let's ask the applicant where they stand with future negotiations and talks before we say anything about a temporary.
And okay, and that fair enough, TJ. And unless there are any further questions for staff, we probably Kim, go ahead.
This is Kim Way.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to remind us all about how when this came to us last, we angsted over the little like fence that was around the sports area, and I just remind ourselves of that. And now this is a substantial change to what we proposed originally, and I think what's going to be next is, I guess, my concern.
Okay. All right. Well, let's not really. Yeah. Let's move on and allow the applicant to have their say here. Applicant representatives are Mr. Ryan Keener, Mr. Trent Smith, and Mr. Jim Sweeney. Gentlemen, let's see. I'm looking to see who we have on camera here. I've got Ryan.
Hi, Bill. Bill, actually, so Trent and Jim will be speaking on behalf of the applicant, and then also Adam Benner and Mark Hours will be joining me to be testifying.
Okay, I do need their pictures so that they can testify. There's Adam and Jim Sweeney up there. I see you. Okay, so gentlemen, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief? Adam?
Yes.
Jim Sweeney?
Yes.
And Ryan Keener?
That's correct, yes. Also, Mark Hours will be joining us as well.
And who will?
Mark Hours.
Okay, Mark, oh, there you are, Mark. Mark, swear or affirm as accordingly?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, gentlemen, the floor.
I swear as well.
Trent?
I'll be speaking too.
Okay, Trent, you swear or affirm?
I do.
Hello, Trent. Trent's the next board member. Okay, so gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go first, if I could. I'm just going to give everybody some context.
I think the conversation that you were having amongst yourselves, I think it's first important that we talk about timeline. This thing was originally approved as a temporary patio, and that is the intent, is for it to remain temporary. However, at this time, the landlord has offered land grant a 10-year lease term. Sorry, can everybody hear me? I'm getting quite a bit of an echo.
Would help.
No, that's better. Sorry. So what we're asking for today is to change what is currently a 3-year approval to a 10-year approval. And I think to Commissioner TJ's point about the economic investment, land grant has looked at whether or not they can make these improvements to the premises and get their money back. And if the lease were to be terminated or the COA were to expire and the land then be ready for development, that would be an acceptable outcome. So I think the first point to talk about would be whether or not the commission, the board, would be open to the idea of a slightly longer short-term approval. We still recognize that this land is prime for development, and I think the recent approvals on the Scioto Peninsula show to everyone that there is about to be a lot of change, particularly to this east end of Franklinton. And I think it's only a matter of time before the current landowners find the appropriate buyer. It is possible that land grant offers to buy this property. They've been trying to do that, but it hasn't come to fruition as of yet. So I think the first question is the timeline. Then I think the second question we could dig into would be the rest of the program elements. To answer Commissioner Overly's question, the lawn ornament area is approximately 2,200 square feet. And it's not our intent to change any of the program elements that are there today. The concerts have existed on a very limited basis. There is live music in the beer garden, but the larger stage structure is something that has been brought in on a temporary basis for larger events. Any of you who have attended some of the larger parties, the anniversary party or the Jenny's ice cream party, know that the beer garden has a day-to-day use and it also has a special event use. So ultimately, what we're asking for, big picture here, is to be able to spend more money to make the beer garden look a little better in the short term, and to formalize some of the activities that happen there now. There already is movie night that happens there, but the screen and the technology to get it set up there are limited by nightfall and having enough ability to project. And it's also, the concert series is also happening there on a limited basis. The stages have been brought in for larger parties in the past on a more temporary basis. So ultimately, what we're looking for here is to put some more money into this on a more extended timeline. And with that, I think I'll ask Adam just to say a few words about the use of the beer garden today and maybe some of the COVID-19 implications that his business is currently experiencing.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you having us back, and appreciate all the comments. I think, when it was brought up about the significant investment, and I think it was Kim who mentioned, we were looking at the fence that was, we had to come back and send the picture, but when we were here last year, I took to really took to a lot of the comments that were said, that when we set this up, it was on that temporary basis because we had a 3-year approval and it expires in 1 year. And, from our day-to-day use, I think that is something that, and why we invited Trent and Jim Sweeney as residents in the area to talk through on how that does impact. As Mark said, we look at this as a day-to-day. It's an extension of the tap room, and right now is our only tap room, as we're not opening with the restrictions inside COVID-19. But comments from me last year about why don't we invest in better fencing or cedar or something that would look nicer than the outdoor rated pine that we're using right now. And if it's expiring in 3 years, that's a lot of investment to not put in. So as we were looking at, this is something that we feel, and I think the feedback that we've received from folks in the neighborhood is that while it's not consistent with how most urban areas is, it's an asset that it provides this open space. So we will invest into it, and we will put more money into it as we have for the past 5.5 years since we first came down here. And instead of having it be an empty lot and waiting for someone to develop, we're willing to continue to put money in to provide something that isn't necessarily something that I did because we didn't have the money to invest into it. So that's really, when you're out there, that feeling that while you're out in the middle of this urban area, there are trees and there are that feeling that that we can provide our customers. So that's really the reasoning behind the change. There is no intention from us to change how we're doing our business for the use of it. I think to the question, the lawn area, our plan would still be to have, once the governor would allow us to do so again, to have those as lawn games, and that would not be going away. And we wouldn't be putting additional seating in that area. People would inherently shift where the entertainment was. Is kind of the way. And I think to Mark's point, we have, whether it's an Ohio State football game or a crew game, if it's nighttime, we'll bring out a projector and put up a screen, and people will come and watch those games. The intent of doing the screen is that it allows us to do that during the day. So where people are coming in the wintertime and coming inside the tap room and watching a hockey game or a football game or a soccer game, we can provide that in the outdoor space. And so it wouldn't add that additional, it just allows us to show that. So it shifts people to the outside. We've done that on a temporary basis where we've rented one of those screens and brought it in. And again, it's something that I don't know. I'm inside, so I can't really attest to how it affected the neighborhood on those days. So those are things that we're not looking really to change any of how we're approaching it. We're just looking to formalize what we have out there now, and it's difficult for us. We're in a chicken and or an egg situation that if I could commit to a longer term lease, but it's tough for a business to get locked in for that long if the permitted use is not going to be allowed. And then from the other side, I understand that it's tough for us to invest in and to do all of bringing in trees or taking out my homemade fences and putting in something that is more aesthetically pleasing than if we know in 2 years. Last year we came and we asked for an extension from 3 years to 5 years because this expires next spring. And that's why we wanted to come this year, because we need to start making business decisions about what we do and can we continue to invest in the neighborhood, or do we have to go out to the suburbs and find a big field where we can do this kind of stuff? I would not like to do that. I really do think that we've been a good neighbor and in the neighborhood. So that's kind of how this all came to be. And I don't know if there's any questions to that.
This is actually Belkis. I just wanted to clarify something from the staff side. And I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, given this 10-year time frame, as I mentioned in previous meetings, within the past couple of years, staff has changed its internal policy to not have temporary approvals as a best practice. So if this were to be approved today, it would just be a permanent approval, and it wouldn't have a time frame limit or a temporary limit set to it. It would just be a permanent approval.
And this is Bart Overly. That was a question I was going to have, and I'm glad you clarified that, Belkis, because I feel like if Land grant, first of all, I think the new planning strategy is more of a permanent strategy. Like I like the way it lays out. You put the stage to the back. We've got some shade trees that are going to give it some nice curb appeal. And if you can commit to materials that are going to make sense for pressure treated pine just doesn't hold up very well. It's a temporary material, but if this is something that you're committed to for a 10-year period and maybe even longer, and you can commit to materials that weather better, then I'm in favor of this.
This is Ryan. I guess I would say that with adding 10 porta potties, I think it's incorrect to say that we don't expect more people more often. This is definitely from the inspirational images, expecting larger crowds to be able to stand while people sit. And I generally, I'm not saying that I'm necessarily against it. I think land grant is great for the community. I want to be supportive through these tough times in terms of wanting to expand outdoor space. I just think that given the permanent nature of this, and the idea there has to be more thought that goes into restrictions on number of people, parking, sound level. There's just, I think, a lot more that goes into that to approving what appears to me to be a significant soundstage and bands area that will have approvals in perpetuity. That it just, I don't think the stage is set right today to say, yes, this is how we move forward. I think there has to be more discussion regarding that number of people and all that.
And Mark, you might be able to speak to, or Ryan, the number of porta potties displayed is what would, just because of the size and space of the area. Is that inaccurate?
Yeah, that's correct. The porta johns that are shown there are just a placeholder for the occupant load that the beer garden holds now. Just because we were concerned that we're taxing the adjacent building with the programming that they have there now. I do think it's important to reiterate that their intent is to not change the programming that they've had the last 2 years that everyone's familiar with. It's just to formalize the amenities.
And then on the I know right now we follow all the noise ordinances that are active for the neighborhood. I'm not as, you might be able to speak to that, Ryan.
Yeah, this is Mark speaking again. There's not been any code enforcement issues for noise or light issued on the beer garden in its current fashion, with the special events that they've had or the limited concert series or movie nights that they've been having as programming. And it's not their intent to amp it up any more than what's already been in place.
So, and I understand the concerns, and I think TJ brought up a point about having this done for 2 years and then coming back. But from I think our standpoint, we've done that as well. And, we've had large events. We've had normal Saturdays. We'd have sunny days. We've had rainy days. We've had a Jenny's event, which was our busiest day that we've had, and continue to show that we can be a good neighbor during those times. But if we do then turn around and invest, and I this is again that we have to understand how the future of everything, if at today we're all on board, and then 5 years down the road and we have to tear this all out because it's a different board that doesn't see that 2 years ago, or the first 3 years or 4 years we were good members. That's a big risk for us, I think, as a business as well. So that's kind of the standpoint that I understand.
And that's why going to a permanent approval makes a lot of sense for you. That you can you don't have that time constraint on it, and you can invest appropriately.
I can't pour any more money into. We would not be able to invest in any sort of additional amenities without any sort of knowing that at every couple years that we have to get renewed approval, or I mean, to
Sure.
Bilkis's point, that there is no. So right now we're at a next year this expires, and unless something changes, then then.
And Adam, just so that I'm clear, this is Ryan, but the 3-year was put on because that was all that the owner at the time would give you guys a lease, and you didn't have a longer lease. And so the thing that I think has changed is that you now feel that you have the ability to extend to 10 years, which you didn't last time you came through. So, I think we may have been willing to give a longer period or given permanent approval for the other part, but you would just ask for the short period at that point. So, I think now knowing that the landowner is willing to give a longer period, what's changing is you're willing to invest more money, and now we have to look at something and say, how do we want that investment? How do we make it right? And the part that I'm just caught off guard is it seems like Belkis was a little caught off guard that this was a 10-year, that this was looking for a permanent approval. And I think that there's more concerns that both staff and us have to look at, if knowing that this is not just a short-term thing, which I'm more supportive of it being a long-term solution than a short-term.
And that's why, because this expires in 2021, that's why we need to start having this conversation, because that's going to be in 6 months or so. So,
I'd rather come up with a long-term solution than a short-term.
Okay, so I want to try to crystallize what's going on here. I get the impression that the board would entertain a long-term approval, but only based upon a more thorough review of the design, including materials and the like. You all can nod or shake your head and say Fergus are crazy, or go thumbs up. Kim, you seem to agree with that concept.
Bill, I would add that I would want capacity. Normally staff has been able to provide, hey, what's the current capacity? What's capacity for a stage area? How that all calculates. We don't have, I think, all that, because I do think that lawn area becomes a different use with a stage in front of it than it was before. And I'd just like to understand all that so we know, eyes wide open, what we're approving.
Okay. Belkis, for example, what kind are there new parking issues to be considered here? Does staff consider that this will attract considerably more people, and if so, what impact will it have on the local parking plan? I suppose there's a lot to be answered here if we're going to really consider this.
Yeah, so the same parking requirements, it's the same as last time, where there still would be a requirement of 264 car parking spaces. And so if this would be approved today, there would be a reduction of 264 car parking spaces for this beer garden portion, because 0 are being proposed. And then there also would be a reduction of 5 bicycle parking spaces because 14 spaces are required for this site. So there would be, again, that significant parking reduction. And again, in terms of timing, this would be a permanent approval, as staff, it's internally we made, there are conversations that were had whereby temporary approvals would no longer be supported moving forward. So this would be a permanent approval with a car parking reduction of 264 spaces. And also, if people aren't speaking, could you mute yourself? I'm getting some feedback.
Belkis, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Is there no longer term solution that is not permanent? If they have a proposed 10-year lease, under these extenuating circumstances, could we propose a 10-year approval?
No.
That's a flat
and I
no.
say that because, and I say that because if this is approved today, then it's just approved. They can go, get their permit, do what they need to do. And, these temporary approvals we learned in the past are just incredibly hard to track. So once you approve something, it's hard to then take it back, if that makes sense. And so that's something that we've learned from our past mistakes, and we just can't track temporary approvals anymore. So if you approve this today, it's just straight up approved, and that's what it is. And then the only thing that could change it would be if, the users of the site wanted to change their programming in the future, or if someone else bought it and wanted to change things. That's when it could be changed. But this would be a permanent approval with no time limit.
Yeah.
Could I suggest a compromise too? That because it sounds like a lot of the concern is the stage and this being turned into what the zoning is, this live entertainment venue, where part of a lot of the concern from my standpoint is that this expires in a year, and if we expire and don't have we can talk about. There's not going to be for us from a business standpoint. There's not going to be any large events this year, so I don't need a stage. This year that could be something that could be talked along and from the plan, but from getting the permanent approval for the use of a beer garden as is today, because to build the stage we would need to come back and get approvals for that use.
Would we be in support of an approval of a extenuating the existing approved usage as a beer garden for the future, and then they would have to come back in for changes with usage and any new builds or design? Is that essentially a possible compromise?
That's
Sorry, I'm getting a lot of
Yeah,
feedback.
I don't know what's happening with the sound, but this is really annoying. This sound is just not going well.
Yeah, I would say so. If you are not speaking, just go ahead and mute. Just put yourself on mute. And so just to speak to TJ's suggestion, the use of a live entertainment venue is already approved, and the programming of the previous beer garden design with the lawn games and the tables and whatnot is already approved. Yes, that approval expires next year. So there is that time constraint, but in terms of an approval today, we don't need to reapprove a use that's already been approved before, unless it would be with this new site plan. So theoretically today, the board could approve this application, but it would just be a permanent approval with the use and the parking reduction. I'm not quite sure what you were trying to suggest, TJ. I know there was some background noise there.
Now their use expires. You hear me? Okay. Now, right now their use expires in 2021. Is that's correct, Belkis, right? You can just give me a thumbs up. And so one alternative here, whether it's today or next month or whatever, would be for us to simply make that use that temporary use that we permitted into a permanent use without any changes to to what we approved 2 years ago. Correct?
Yeah, the use only could be approved
Okay, without approving all the without approving the stage or any of the new designs.
Correct. So the COA that I would issue would just approve the use only. But I will say that what was approved last year, the programming of the site, would still expire next year. So the only thing that would be permanently approved today would be the use, which would include the parking reduction.
Okay. As far as programming is concerned, that be made permanent as well.
Sorry?
Can the programming permit be made permanent as well at some point?
Yes, it can be. I mean, theoretically, the board could approve everything today permanently. The site plan, the use,
Now, I guess what I'm trying to say, Belkis, is can we do this? Do we have a Chinese menu in front of us? Can we select off of that menu that which we want to approve and that which we want to hold pending further submittals by the applicant?
I think the clearest thing to do here is for the applicant to just submit a brand new application next month for exactly what they want.
Okay.
So if they want a permanent approval of the use, they apply for that. If they want a permanent approval of all the site programming, they apply for that. I think that will be the clearest cut thing instead of, chopping it up into smaller pieces. And if the board needs time to think about the programming and, the permanence of some of the components that they're suggesting, then this application could be tabled, and then they could, submit updated materials or more detailed, a more detailed narrative of what they're asking, and then we can entertain this. That's an option.
Okay.
So it sounds like what Adam is asking for is a commitment that we'd be open to it being more permanent. It sounds like from everything I've heard, we are. What I agree with Ryan on is that, and Bart on, I believe, is that there's not enough here from a finish, a material, and a design standpoint.
TJ. Can you repeat that Can you repeat that, TJ? I think you cut out for a minute.
Yes. We are looking for, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
He is looking for a commitment from us for a long-term option. I would be open to a approval for a permanent approval on occupancy or usage and programming as they are currently approved and we've approved in the past, and allow him to come back and resubmit for new designs, higher end finishes, and more permanent structures moving forward, which we would then have to review and approve. The understanding is the things that we have approved in the past, we allowed to be homemade and of a lesser quality than anything we would normally be expected with something of any permanence, purely because they were not going to be permanent. And we were trying to help with the idea of it not being a huge monetary out of pocket for something that is a 2 to 3 year approval. So I would be open to that suggestion if that was something that was on the table or you guys agreed with.
I hear
TJ,
you on
this
that,
is Kim.
TJ. Oh, sorry, just one interjection. I hear you, TJ. So if the board were to permanently approve the prior site plan, that's actually a different application and a different site plan. So they'd have to come back like next month, for example, with that site plan that was, from the different application, and have that approved permanently. So they would still have to come back for that. That couldn't be something that would be approved today, because today in front of us, we don't have that specific application. This is a new application for a new site program.
This is Judy. Can I say something? Hello? This is Judy.
Yes.
Go ahead, Judy.
I'm all for the applicant applying for a 10-year permission to do all of this permanently. But in the short run, I think we need to take another look at parking, noise, how it might affect an apartment building that's proposed to be across the street. If all of that's cool, I don't see what the problem is, but we haven't looked at that.
Yeah, Judy, this is Kim Way. That's my concern is making more into it's the performance side of it. You know, how often is there going to be music played here? Is it 7 days a week? Or I would like to understand from the neighborhood whether the neighbor would see this as an. And I know that Trent was going to speak and Jim was going to speak on behalf of the neighborhood. TJ, you live in the neighborhood. I see you're positive, so you see it as an asset. I
would consider it an asset, yes.
I mean, I think the beer
How
garden
late
is
would the
great.
noise go?
We would be restricted by the city noise ordinance at anyway, which is, I believe, 10 p.m.
The latest the noise went in the last 2 years was a last-minute Ohio State touchdown during a video play of the outdoors of the game, and the crowd cheering at what was it, close to 12:30. That was about the loudest I think it ever got, and for good reason.
Once a decade, people can live with that.
So anyway, I still stick to it would be nice to get some assurance from more than just a handful of people that this turning into more of a music venue, and we don't have any control over how often that happens. Obviously there's the noise level and the time permitted, but I keep remembering an elderly person that lives down the street who has trouble finding a parking space, and I would be concerned about people like that in the neighborhood that might not have a voice and aren't speaking up.
Jim, do you want to take that one? She is your neighbor.
Sure, I'd love to. Thanks for letting me in. I love this idea. I think it needs to be done permanently, both the use and the site programming. Land Grant has been a spectacular neighbor. I live and own my house 500 feet away from this site. And I know the woman you're talking about. Her name is Mitzi. She's my next door neighbor. She loves Land Grant too. If she were on this, I'm sure she would agree with me. Her issue was more about the parking on our street and the neighbors around who were concerned that they would have an issue parking on our street. But as it happened, well, not as it happens, but you supported and we got a parking permit, and it's been working out beautifully. And nobody on our street has had a problem that I'm aware of parking ever since. So for the tiny few areas around that are actually currently residential and ownership, and I am the closest owner to the site, about 500 feet away, we have no trouble adding more people and or even vehicles to the neighborhood. It's not a problem. But what we're learning, and I've been going to Land Grant since literally the day they opened, is that the parking has not been a problem. Uber, walking, bicycles, it's been used everywhere. And so, yeah, I'm emphatically in support of this. And for those of you who don't know me, I've been kicking around the neighborhood for like 20 years and one of the authors of the plan that we're following, city planner by training. And I'm somebody who lives in the neighborhood, works in the neighborhood, and here all the time. And Land Grant is a great partner, and I think this should be a permanent thing.
Thank you. Okay. So now I'm in a quandary.
Excuse me, Bill, did
Mark,
Trent Smith?
Trent, you want to talk? Trent?
Yeah, I would like to say something, please. Thank you. I would want to echo what Jim said, that Land Grant has been a model business since the day they opened. My role at the Board of Trade has always been that when a new business moves in, I reach out to them and see how they would like to be involved with the neighborhood. But in their case, they reached out to me. So their their intention and their effort to be a good commercial neighbor to Franklinton has been evident and forthcoming since day one, and it continues to this day. I would also say that an earlier comment today was made that you would have trouble finding an area in an urban setting that would have this type of a venue. But what about Columbus Commons? I would argue that people will move down to East Franklinton because of this place. This is an amenity that has been completely embraced by the people in and around that area, like what Jim just said. You know, even his, you know, more senior neighbor than him loves this place. And I know that the city has a massive and comprehensive parking study going on. And, you know, we're going to solve that problem one way or the other, whether it's Uber and bicycling and pedestrian traffic to the place or what. But I don't really see that should be an impediment to getting this plan approved when it has been as successful as it has been since the day they established this beer garden. I would also want to make the point that as far as the portable toilets go, I think that's a great move by land grant for the simple convenience of the patrons. If you've ever been down to a land grant party, it is tough to get into the restrooms inside, and they're small inside. And I think that having these permanently on site I think it's a brilliant move from a customer service perspective. And this makes us unique. This makes this neighborhood unique. This is the types of things that we've always wanted, is something like this that makes us a destination place where people realize that, hey, if I want to go there, I probably shouldn't drive my car. I better Uber down there. And so I really don't see that as something that I feel like we should be concerned about. I think that people expect density in this surrounding area, and that density is just going to be the new normal, or not the new normal. It is the normal, and it's only going to get more dense. And the fact that Lance Robbins still wants to build apartments across from them when they've had a successful beer garden / entertainment venue all of this time would make me believe that it's not a concern for the residents. I know a couple of people that live at River and Rich that moved down there solely because of the activity in the area. So from the Board of Trade's perspective, we adamantly support this plan and this use. And I would also support it from just a neighborhood resident perspective. I've not been down here quite as long as Jim, but I've been volunteering in the neighborhood since about 2005. I started working at the Board of Trade in 2010, and I moved into the neighborhood in February of 2013. And I think this is just fantastic. And the last thing I would say about land grant and their commitment to this neighborhood and the investment is simply that they have committed to Franklinton, and they've committed in big ways. And I don't want to see this get taken away. So I'll leave it at that. And I'm with Jim. I strongly support this, and I really hope that you guys will make the decision to make this a permanent approval.
Okay, thank you, Trent.
Thank you.
Okay, commissioners or board members.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Can you hear me? This is Christopher Lohr, Planning Manager. I got a note from Bart Overly, and I just wanted to read it for the record. He's having audio issues, so he says, quote, "I support this plan as a permanent piece, but need info on materials such as permanent gravel, like silica pebbles over construction gravel and wood elements. I think the parking is a red herring. 2 public parking garages online, and the lawn area adds at most 150 people for lawn seating during events. It is a small-scale event venue, and I think it would be greatly enhanced in the new configuration."
Okay, so thanks.
This is TJ. I think, and the question is for I think Adam right now is, does he want us to vote on this as is, knowing that I believe this will probably not pass with the information on materials and structures, or I think we are in favor of him resubmitting the current site plan next month for a permanent usage and occupancy. And then if he wants to submit after that or at the same time for changing the layout and site plan, we could then take a look at materials and layout and permanent structures. It sounds like we are in fairly support, but don't have the information currently. So, Adam, what's your?
And that's kind of where I was going, TJ. I think we need some make sure we've given the applicant enough direction on what we're looking for in a permanent plan, so that they can do a resubmittal that will satisfy the board going forward. So board, let me start with the applicant. Applicant, do you feel like we've given you enough information here that you could submit a plan that would satisfy some of the concerns regarding structures and materials?
So would we be able to get the permanent approval of this site plan submitted with then an amendment that has the fixtures and finishes?
My again, without taking a formal vote, my read of the people in front of me is that the board would look favorably upon this application, provided that that materials and structures more appropriate to a permanent venue were submitted with the plan. Board, nod your head if you agree with what I just said.
And this is Ryan.
I guess I don't understand if I know the difference in what, because if you vote, right, and it's either we put it up for permanent approval with an amendment or we resubmit. Is that kind of the idea, or no? I'm
no. If we
Belkis,
talk.
I just wanted to interject.
Sorry.
Could I clarify things a little?
Yes.
Could I clarify things a little? Okay. So this is a new application. So there's a few options that can happen right now. One, the board can approve this application as submitted right now. Two, the board can approve this application as submitted on the condition that the applicant return for approval of materials. And that would be like the type of wood used, the gravel on the ground, things like that. Or three, the board could vote to table this application and they would just submit a whole new application next month. So those are just three options. Obviously, there are more options. You could disapprove it, but those are three options that come to mind given what the board has just stated.
So I guess to add on to that, either way, you would be coming back next month or soon thereafter with a permanent plan for structure for structures and materials. That makes sense?
Yes. And I don't know if Ryan was going to say something. I know
Adam, and this is Belkis. Tell me if I'm not allowed to. I mean, Adam, I understand, because I'm in development and, not having public meetings for whatever it was, 2 months or 3, definitely you were probably ready earlier. I understand that that's a delay. I understand you may be on constraints to knowing to want to have to sign a lease on a long term and having some level of commitment that we can get there. And so is the honest, is waiting a month, is that problematic because of those things, or is coming back? I think the general census, at least for me and what I'm sensing from the group, is we're generally in favor of some permanent solution. We like that. I don't think there's huge, but want more information, because at least for me, I was caught off guard that this was a permanent application. And so trying to understand your time constraints might help answer what we do.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, well, the way Belkis clarified it helps that to me, it sounds like that the second option would give us confidence to start marching forward, investing in having Mark work on a lot more detailed drawings. I mean, this was just, put together not on the Mark and Ryan, not on the, just on this kind of view. So with the idea that the board would be looking for, this in these drawings, these are our current look with some additional permanence. So with that guidance, that allows us to start working on that, and I can continue finalizing our long-term plans. I think that all that timing for us makes a lot of sense. So if that number 2 option would be, I think makes the most sense to me.
This is TJ again. I think we are in support of a permanent solution. And I think that if this was a conceptual review, we would all be in approval for the conceptual review. So I think that being said, if you just want us to not vote on it and you can come back, I mean, if we want to discuss thoughts on permanence, I think everything looks good. I have concerns about just the Porta Johns and coverage on those, but I mean, we're talking minimal things that I think if you guys looked into a little longer and designed it with a little more depth, would shake themselves out. So I think you've got a pretty firm commitment from us. It sounds like that we are behind moving forward with this as a permanent solution.
Does anybody on the board disagree with what TJ just had to say?
I don't. I agree with that. I would be happy to approve the site plan personally and let with details. We kind of know the pieces, parts of it. They just need to do a little work on them, and I agree with the applicant that it would help to give them some confidence, some formal confidence that they can move forward.
Okay, so what we're looking for to help the applicant then is a motion that would approve the site plan as submitted. But Kim, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I'm not ready to approve the site plan, knowing that it's going to be permanent. I'd like to take some more time to think about it now as a permanent thing than as a temporary thing, because
I'm with Kim
different
there.
perspective. Yeah.
I don't feel like I would want to agree to permanence on this yet. There's not enough detail on it looking forward.
Okay.
If they submitted to what Belkis had mentioned earlier, if they submit next month the existing site plan and ask for us to change it from a temporary to a permanent approval, I think we can approve the usage and programming that has currently been approved permanently. And then they can come back with a conceptual design at the same time, and we can start having this conversation about what this now looks like as a future going forward. So that would give them plenty of assurances that we are on board for the long term.
Okay. In that case, and how many? So again, who's with? I need kind of a. Well, I'm just going to propose a motion. Heck with this.
This is Belkis. So it sounds like the motion, given what I'm hearing, it sounds like the motion would be to table the application, so that way they can come back next.
That's correct.
That's where I was going,
That's suggested motion based on what everyone said.
All right, I will entertain that motion from anyone who wants to make it.
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second. Kim Way.
All right. Any further discussion? I think we beat this horse to death.
Matt Egner, do you have something to say?
I was just going to make a motion to table it. The applicant's got the sense that we're looking to approve it, and we just need to give them time to come up with their real plan here with materials.
But okay, let's take the vote and then I'll talk a little more. Belkis, call the roll, please.
Yeah, Dr. Bach?
Approve.
Mr. Egner? Mr. Burgett?
Approved.
Mr. Overly?
Approve.
Mr. Szymanski?
Approve.
And Mr. Way.
Approve.
Okay.
Thank you.
And to the applicant, I agree with the rest of the board that at some conceptual level, I think we're all in favor of a permanent solution here. We encourage you to return both with an application to make the temporary arrangement permanent and with a conceptual design as to what you would like to do going forward.
I guess
the idea that it will be permanent.
I guess I'm confused because Kim had Kim's comment was about needing more information on the actual use, and some comments were on the materials. So,
Kim, you want to clarify that?
Yeah, that's.
No, it wasn't on the use. It was on the site plan, the elements of the site plan, just locations
Okay,
of
it is
things.
materials. Okay, all right.
Organization.
Sorry about that. Yep, makes sense.
And then materials too on top of that. But yeah, no, I think I'm good with the beer garden and the activities. So
I just would add one thing that TJ, like the screening of the porta potties, so that you just don't see the top. Like those are all the things I think that need to be looked at before some permanent, structure on that. I know you have to be able to get them out of there to empty, but like those are the things that I think, Kim, maybe you're touching on too, is the site plan, how all that interplays with each other.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Any other advice to the applicant? Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, applicant.
Good time, everyone.
All right.
This is Belkis. Just one thing about the agenda today. So I am noting that it's about 5:10, so we're past the 2-hour mark. So I'd like to suggest that I make my small update on 642 West Broad Street next month in the interest of time.
Okay. So noted. We can do that. Your agenda. Okay, I will quickly read, which I have to do. I will quickly read all this stuff into the record here. Everybody can listen if they want, I suppose. Staff approved applications issued certificates of approval. The first one is EF 2002-001, exact address TBD, lots between West Broad, West State, McDowell, and the railroad. Approved 2620, Gravity 2 lot split, and COA is issued 2620. Other ones, EF 2005-001, 566 West Town Street, approved 5/6/2020. Beckett Forge Mural Graphics, COA issued, same date. Then we have board issued applications, issued certificates of approval. Number one's EF 1910-004, 401-431 West Ridge Street, approved 1/22/2020. The Lucas Street Plaza, COA issued 1/27/20. Number two, EF 1910-003, 401-431 West Ridge Street, approved 10/15/2019. Updated uses and parking reduction, COA issued 2/11/20. Number three, EF 1912-002, 429, 451, 455 West Broad Street, approved 12/17/2019. New construction, Gravity 2 parking garage, COA issued 2/21/20. Number four, EF 1910-001, 440 West State Street, approved 10/15/2019. New construction, co-living building, COA issued 2/24/20. And number five, EF 1912-003, 429, 451, 455 West Broad Street, approved 1/22/20. New construction, Gravity 2 mixed use tower, COA issued 3/4/2020. And our next meeting is Wednesday, June 24th at 3 p.m. Right here online. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. And Belkis, if you could call me on the phone when we're done here.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
We are adjourned.